Chapter 1: Shapes and Proportions. For this first section, we'll be warming up by breaking down some photographs and turning objects into simpler shapes. I have provided these photos in the class resource section in order to help you get started on the assignment. Now, this assignment is flexible enough that you can either use traditional media or jump straight into Photoshop. If you are using traditional media, you'll just need the same materials like we used from week 1, and as well as some tracing paper. Or if you happen to have some sort of light box, you can use that as well as a substitute. Lastly, you'll need to print out the images you're going to be using for this traceover exercise. I would like you all to set up your own still life by using objects that you can find around your home. When you do this, however, I would advise to use items like cups, fruit, bottles, any kind of container or box, and other objects that are fairly simple in shape and form. As for printing these, they can be in black and white in order to save some ink. You can either fill up the page with one image or do a half page like this in order to save some materials. However, I wouldn't go smaller than this. When you have the paper set up, start off by tracing the frame around the image, like so. Just a tip, it helps to put a bit of tape to keep the pages from sliding around. Before we get into the shapes, just remember to stick to simple shapes and lines as we did in week 1, just like the square, circle, and triangle, and all the other shapes that we've kind of combined from the exercises. Notice here, I'm going to start off by dotting off certain sections of an object in order to draw my lines. So what we're doing is we're pretty much just building up those good drawing habits from last week. So I'll mark these points off here so I can find my curves. Try not to blaze through this, and make sure you take your time in thinking about what shapes and lines to use. Remember, the point of this exercise is to find efficient ways in order to make complex subjects or complex scenes and try and find ways to simplify them. Just like last week, you can also draw in a circle using last week's exercise of following through. After that, you can follow up by refining those edges and getting those curves a little more accurate. Moving on to that box, again, just dotting off the corners in order to get those straight lines true. So again, you could dot off these lines and just even warm up on the side of the page as needed. Turn your page as needed in order to get those lines as true as you can. From here, I'm going to move on to the shadows because those are going to be important shapes as well in the composition. Usually they're a mixture of straight lines and curves, depending on the object that's casting them. Now there is a big line I missed in here, so in the still life, there's that dividing line of the table to the background. And that's a really important part of the still life. So marking off the background, that line will pretty much go through all the way through all these objects, which separates the table that it's on top of. So make sure you draw through instead of just trying to get section by section. That way you'll get a better connecting line that shows all the way through. And then getting the shadow of this ball here. And from there, I pretty much got all the shapes I need in order to complete this still life. From here, you could kind of break it down a little bit more. So you can connect some straight lines that have on these cylinders and cones, just so I can make it more of a triangle and a rectangle for the shapes. From there, you can remove the image underneath and just kind of double check what you have so far. Now from here, this is pretty much all you need in order to call this done. As long as you have the simple square, circles, and triangles, and not getting anything too complex, this part of the exercise can be finished. Here's a quick look at the finished traceover, as well as the photograph next to the drawing itself. Now, the more complex your subject, you'll most likely end up with more shapes. I'll be reviewing to see how well you simplify the image and the integrity of the shapes you've been using. You can do this assignment all in pencil or any of the traditional media we've gone over since week 1, but just as promised, I'll be doing a few more demonstrations in Photoshop to open up some options for you all. I'll also be going over on how to approach more complex subjects in the following demos.